Hi, I'm Frederik from Skyscrapers, and welcome to the second of 3 short tech talks. As this is the second talk, I'll just give you a quick recap on the background. So, at the start of this year, together with Siris, we surveyed a bunch of SaaS companies about their DevOps and cloud native practices. And it actually has a lot of interesting stuff that you might want to check out. If you do, you normally should be able to find a link to the survey somewhere around this video. In this second talk, I'll be interviewing Nick Boeckhaert. Nick is part of Siris, where he's Senior Technological Advisor Software. And in this role, he works mostly with early phase and young digital teams on making technical choices that make the most sense to them, depending on where they are. Oh, and a side note, he also helped me out with creating the survey. What did we talk about? Well, we touched quite some of the stuff that was also in the talk with Tom, but from a more technical perspective. For example, why are SaaS companies not using all the building blocks available to them? How to move fast with cloud services? Where do serverless and containers fit in? And many other topics. In any case, I found it super interesting, and I hope you do as well. Enjoy. Hi, Nick.
Hello.
Good to see you
Nice,
again.
nice to be here.
Yes, I'll give you I'll go to the introduction first, and then we'll go deeper into you.
Okay.
So welcome everybody. This is the second in the series of 3 chats with 3 software as a service veterans, as I like to call them, where we use our survey to have a nice and interesting chats. Yesterday we had Tom Klaassen. Today we have Nick with us, and tomorrow we'll have Erwin, who actually will be zooming in on security. So if you want to join tomorrow, there are still some slots available for that. It's the same Zoom link, by the way. The chat we're going to have today with Nick is based on the survey we did in the beginning of this year amongst software as a service companies in Belgium, which was mostly completed by CTOs and VP engineering type roles. And most of the companies were between 1 to 50 people, with some outliers towards 200 and I think even ones towards 400 people. So quite an interesting spread of companies. Before you ask in the Q&A, yes, we will record this session as the other sessions. They will be made available later. We will also make available the survey on which this conversation is based. So while we might be throwing around with some numbers throughout this conversation, you'll be able to dive in yourself in a couple of days. This tech talk shouldn't take more than 40 minutes. We are mindful of time. I have my timer right next to me. And if you have questions, do ask them. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom software, which you can use to ask questions. Throughout the conversation, Nick and I will monitor these questions, and if we feel they're relevant to the conversation, we will definitely answer them or do our best in answering them. So that's that for the introduction and the housekeeping, as I like to call it. So let's dive right in. Hi, Nick. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm okay. Nice to be here.
Okay. So first of all, Nick, I'd like to say you were also one of the people who helped compose the survey. So thank you for that, by the way.
Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, my pleasure. And as I understand it, you help mostly startups and young scale-ups in making technology choices, product decisions, and those kind of things. But maybe it's better that you yourself tell a bit what you do. But before you do, I remember Tom saying yesterday he has no opinion on which is best, AWS or Google Clouds, or what technology to use. I have the feeling you have stronger opinions on technology. But tell us, what do you do for your customers?
Okay, so I work for Siris, a non-profit organization, a daughter organization of Agoria, and I work there in the software engineering team. So basically, I help people who make software for a living. That's how I often call it. And most of my customers are either completely new to building SaaS products and software. So many of the entrepreneurs I coach have no background in technology whatsoever, but a lot of knowledge in the domain that they're active in. Or they are more younger startups, scale-ups, young scale-ups that have less maturity in their organization, and that are sometimes struggling with product management, with technology choices, with architectures. And then I try to help them as much as possible in a more coaching role, because I typically don't take a big operational role. I just try to help them make the right decisions, be a sounding board, and so on. Yeah, that's what I do for a living.
All right, that's super clear. You told us what you do, who you do it for, and who you work with. I think that paints a pretty accurate picture of you, who you are, and why you should be here in this chat.
Okay, cool.
All right, let's dive right in. I have the survey open. I think you have it open as well.
I have it here as well.
Before we dive into the survey, actually, as I said, you participate or you helped out with Sirius and especially yourself in helping create the questions and figuring out what we should ask to these to get a good idea on the state of cloud native and DevOps in Belgium and Belgian SaaS companies. Maybe can I just ask you a question? And we didn't prepare this question, but why did you help create the survey? What was your motivation to do so?
Well, first of all, you asked me, and I was glad somebody asked me to work on it. But the deeper motivation is that on one hand, I've been in technology and in software engineering for a long time, since '97, and I've seen a lot of stuff happen. Yeah, I saw the beginning of cloud computing and the virtual machines and that kind of stuff, and all the way to what we have today. We have serverless, we have containers, we have the whole shebang. We have GitHub with tons of super cool projects, Stack Overflow, you name it. And at the same time, that is for me super fascinating. Yeah? Of course, there's a lot of hype around that as well, especially containers and Docker and Kubernetes. There's a lot of hype around it as well. And at the same time, I don't see many of my customers use these things, and I find that a bit of I don't really understand that. Why not? Because it's my opinion. You said that I have strong opinions about things, but this is one of them. I believe if you're a SaaS company, what matters most is that you create a tremendous user experience for your customers. You build an application that is close to magic for your customers. Right. That's of course the ultimate. And the back office, the back end, the supporting technology, source that in as much as possible. It is orders of magnitude easier than 10 years ago to build scalable, available things. Yeah,
you're going way in. So
yeah. And so the survey, to come back, the survey was one of these things that I thought could help me understand why there is this discrepancy. I also realized that most of my customers are small teams. So I was wondering, is this also for bigger teams the case? Are we as an industry in Belgium, are we lagging behind or not? Or is it just pure hype, all these things? So that was my motivation to help out with the survey.
Okay, interesting. And would you say the survey confirmed your fears in some ways?
Well, fears. It confirmed part of my it confirmed.
Or suspicions.
Yeah. It confirms things. On most of the questions, it's I would say 50-50. There's roughly 50% of the respondents are quite advanced and are quite advanced in either CI/CD or the adoption of cloud native and the other one are relatively old school. I'm not saying that is a bad thing per se, but they lag. In my opinion, they lag a bit behind.
Okay. Well, I think this is a good moment to maybe dive in a little bit more into the survey because you mentioned CI/CD as one of the things. Actually, we touched on 6 areas. So for the people listening in, to give you a little bit of a preview of the survey. So we touched on team. Well, was a small part. How big is your team? Are you hiring developers? That kind of stuff. Cloud technology, cloud providers, all that kind of stuff. Delivery, CI/CD, and all those things. Architecture, which is more of a broad term, I think, which also talks about cloud components, but also about serverless and containers and all those kind of things. Operations, we touched briefly, and I think that the last but not least, the security aspect. So maybe with what you just said about this gap and and what is possible and what is being used, and this
Mhm.
this duality. I mean, some companies are very advanced, some companies are not that advanced at all. Could be interesting, maybe just go into each area and just pick out one interesting observation that you may
Cool.
have had. All right, so first in the cloud section, so what would you say was like really something that stands out to you in that area?
We have a question where we ask how do you deploy, how do you source your compute, or how do you deploy on what kind of infrastructure is it? Single like servers, either virtual or even physical, all the way to, let's say, containers and serverless. And if you look at those numbers, it's there's still in this case 40%, roughly more than 40%, who still deploy on a very traditional either real servers or VMs.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something I on one hand it confirms what I see, but on the other hand I find this a bit it's a missed opportunity in a sense, because I think going with containers, going with serverless allows you to put a lot more responsibility on the end of your cloud provider, leaving, I would say, more time at your end to build that stellar user experience. So
Okay.
that was one of these things that I wondered.
Yeah, maybe some good news as well. There was also 67% of people who were using containers or serverless.
You could
But
also
again,
look at it.
it's a do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you're actually saying that it's a missed opportunity to put responsibilities with your cloud provider, and so so a missed opportunity to move faster as a software as a service company.
I think so. Yeah. A missed opportunity to move faster. That's one thing, but also to share more risk with your service, with your cloud provider.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, if you're a small team, and like I said, my world is smaller teams. So probably a team of a couple of hundred people will look different at it, and that's fine. But for a small team, if you have to maintain servers, if you have to maintain operating systems and databases and stuff, you could wonder why am I doing this? Well,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
a bit of money, I can let Amazon do that for me, or Azure or whatever. And in the end, you are responsible anyway. You offer a SaaS service. You have to make sure that the data of your customers is treated correctly and fine and well. So you will have to set up things like backup and restore and that kind of. You have to do that anyway. So,
True.
but it's not your core business. So, in that sense, I think it's a missed opportunity, or at least something you should make a conscious decision about. And that's what I think many companies, also my customers, sometimes don't do. They just, because we used to do it like that, that's why we do it still today.
Yeah. Would you say that people using this classic infrastructures, well, I'm calling this classic infrastructure, I mean like still using physical servers, still 9%, VMs with a name, as we tend to call them in the DevOps world, pets instead of cattle. Would you say those people are maybe scared, or they just have some legacy that they have difficulty tackling, or just they don't know better? Where do you think this?
It's a good question. I don't know. I think
Too
it's also
expensive to change.
I think it's also part of just the unknown. People don't know about it. I don't know that many people who have tried like something serverless, for example, albeit for just a small pet project or something. While setting up servers, that's something we already do for 20 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know a couple of companies who run basically who have their own infrastructure, a couple of VMs, a load balancer in front of it. They have all that. They run the load balancer. They run the database. They run it all, and there's a team of 7. And I'm wondering, and it's not because they don't want to, but they just don't know that there is another world out there.
Yeah, and maybe discuss this customer, well, not this company or this that you're talking about, where they have like this classic three-tier
Mhm.
model, load balancer, front
Mhm.
end, back end kind of way, or depending on where you put the tiers, of course. Yeah, they're just happy, I guess. I mean, they just know how to deploy. They have a big monolith probably that they can just deploy to this setup. And but how does it hurt them? Because they maybe don't realize that it's hurting them or limiting them.
Well, it is hurting them because otherwise they wouldn't talk to me. Because then they would be happy doing their thing. It's hurting their scalability. The company I'm talking about is an engineering company. They have
Don't share any
algorithms.
details.
No. They are very good in engineering, but they're not software engineering, but they have calculation software for something,
In their
simulation
domain.
software.
Yeah, yeah.
Voila. And they happen to express their algorithms, of course, in software.
Uh-huh.
But they were never in the business of building a software product. They don't have those skills, so they acquired those skills along the way.
Yeah.
And then yeah, what you do, you let's say you have a Python application. You Google it, how to deploy a Python application. Okay, I need a I need an Nginx in front of it, and I mean that's how they work. And now they because everything runs on on one or two instances, they start to have scalability issues because their calculations cannot follow the
Yeah,
print,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then they wonder, okay, how will I solve this?
And then a whole new world opens up to them when you start talking to them.
Yeah, voila.
Okay,
Indeed.
cool. All right. Okay, so that's cloud. That's a bit. We talked a bit about containers. We might come back to that later. So, but
Mm-hmm.
then also, I think one of the other interesting points is that ultimately it's quite hopeful in the sense that if you look at the spread of public cloud providers,
Mm-hmm.
um, do you did you see any learnings there or anything you could share on that? I mean, 64% of the people that applied are using Amazon Web Services, 27% are using Azure, 19% is using Google Cloud, which I found a bit surprising because we don't see it that often. And still
Mm-hmm.
30% was using other providers, which are things like OVH, Hetzner, and even some like, very unknown hosting companies still out there for SaaS companies. So yeah, what is your view on that?
Well, I had expected quite a lot AWS and Azure, to be honest. Google, I don't see Google that much either in my environment, but okay. But it's still it follows a bit the same reasoning. It's the fact that DigitalOcean and OVH and so on were mentioned a couple of times. Is to me partly because there are a number of companies out there that don't tap into this cloud world.
Mm-hmm.
They still look at it from a very traditional sense. Okay, we need servers, we need a database, and we'll install everything ourselves, rather than looking at what bigger providers can do. I personally know Amazon best. I don't know Amazon the best. I mean, I made that choice a while ago. I can only spend so many hours a week looking at cloud. So I know AWS hands-on the most. But I'm not married to them either. So yeah,
Okay.
I find it fascinating that people still deploy their own infrastructures on more traditional hosting environments like OVH. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and maybe this is a good thing because we talked about the duality before. I think if
Mm-hmm.
you go to the delivery aspect of the survey,
Mm-hmm.
page 16, by the way, if you're looking into the survey yourself, do you see it reflected there as well? Because actually, I was surprised that 73% of people do use CI or CD, which is quite hopeful, I guess. Although that means still about 27% of people basically don't use any automation or use some kind of custom scripts or stuff like that. So this thing of the old way of thinking maybe, and companies, SaaS companies limiting themselves in the speed of development and innovation. Yeah, it's also visible in the delivery part of the survey.
Yeah, well, I think there platforms like GitLab and GitHub and so on, and the fact that is now more or less an industry standard, and they are also more either integrating with CI/CD services like Circle CI, or are offering it themselves, what GitLab is doing. I think that makes the threshold to get started with it lowers that tremendously. Mm-hmm. Because frankly, if you have to set up everything yourself, I mean, it's not that it is a month of work, but still you're setting up a CI/CD server and stuff. It takes a while. This is again not core business, and I can understand that if you have a team of 3 that is cranking out features at the highest possible speed, that they don't necessarily want to invest a lot in building, in having a CI/CD pipeline set up, unless it is point and click from a vendor. And in that sense, I think with things like GitLab or GitHub, they lower the bar. They make it much easier to do it.
Okay. Interesting. We actually got a question from Mark, and I'll read it in a minute, but it's actually relating also to another part of the survey, and I think this part as well that you mentioned on. So you're saying, yeah, people can build their own things. You can set up CI/CD, but it takes time to set up, so you're better off using a vendor. I think for using hosting services, you use cloud providers. I think we didn't touch that, but actually in the part of this cloud, a lot of developers themselves are setting up the cloud, so they're still spending quite some time on doing that as well. And maybe Mark's question kind of comes from that area. So he's asking for the other people, since it concerns small teams, isn't recurring cost maybe a cause? Since often the recurring costs are lower if you manage stuff yourself, which as a startup, you usually, you don't count your own time because it's for free almost, or it seems to be for free. So, and as he says himself, and as such, it gives at least the impression that it is cheaper if you do it yourself, especially if you're not yet concerned with scalability. So I have a strong opinion on this. I think we even touched topics related to this yesterday in the interview with Tom, but I'm sure you also have an answer to this question.
Yeah, no answer. I have at least my view on it. I think
which is why you're here.
You have to look, I think, at total cost of ownership. What does it cost? What is the total cost of ownership of having an infrastructure that, for example, you maintain yourself, or that you can rely on a third party to do that for you? And is it the best possible way of deploying your own scarce resources, being the talent of your developers? I have customers who have concerns about the cost of cloud. And the funny thing is, because everything is so transparent in the sense of, Amazon gives you exactly how they charge for what they charge. People start wondering, will I not do too much calls or this or that? While if you have there an infrastructure sitting, you pay a monthly fee, and then a lot of other costs are just completely hidden. The fact that you have to every now and then patch your operating system. You have to do that, and so in my opinion,
you have to patch your CI/CD. You have to monitor it. You have to.
So in my opinion, if you would do the complete math, I think from total cost of ownership perspective, I'm quite sure that is cheaper. And it's also from a point of view as a startup, what do you want to do? You want to build a best possible solution for your customers, and keep their data safe and keep everything good. Patching an OS is not necessarily core business of yours, but you have to do it. So if you can outsource that to somebody else or to your provider, it's just a win.
Yeah, it's kind of similar into, again, what we talked about, Tom. It's about cost, it's about hidden costs. And even in a startup, yes, you could argue these costs, even if they're hidden, they're okay, because startup, we're having plenty of time and our time is free. But there's also an opportunity cost. All the time you spend and energy you spend and mind power you spend on figuring things out that other people either already have figured out for you, or either automated it in a tool or whatever. yeah, all that energy becomes available and is kind of an investment you can use to better spend your own energy in what you do best, which is understanding your own business, making it deeper for your customers
Yeah,
and offering value.
yeah.
So I think you kind of, the two propositions, what you said and what Tom said, are, them together are very good reasons why you shouldn't do it yourself, even if you have
yeah.
a startup where, yeah.
But I have a customer that basically runs a Django app. They built their application on top of Django, and they deployed it in a Lambda function as a monolith in a Lambda function. It is both operationally dirt
So
cheap.
a
Yeah,
monolith in a Lambda function. Okay.
absolutely.
Okay,
So they
cool.
deploy the entire Django app as one go in a Lambda function. They have an API gateway in front of it with basically one route, proxy everything to the Lambda function, and that's it. So that is both super scalable and dirt cheap. So, and operationally, they don't have to worry about the OS nor about the Python runtime. It's all the latest and greatest and managed by AWS. You only have to make sure that their app is okay. And I mean, it's probably against the philosophy of Lambda and microservices, but it works. It is dirt cheap. It is scalable. If their load pattern is that in the weekend almost nobody uses the app, so in the weekend that whole thing is basically down, in the sense that it's there's nothing running. It's just ready to receive traffic.
Yeah,
And
cool.
I find that a very elegant solution.
Yeah. To be honest, the theoretical architect in my, that I do some architecture consulting from time to time, the kind of, I sometimes tend to go like, okay, we have to, build a proper architecture. But what you just said now with the monoliths in a Lambda function, I'm like, oh my God, no. But you're right. I mean, I guess especially for, depending on the size where you are as a company, if you're still in the product market fit kind of, search, you're just iterating and looking for it. It doesn't really matter.
No?
All your worries are taken care of. You don't have a lot of load anyway. You don't have to, so and you can just iterate, right, and experiment as much as you want.
Voilà. Indeed. That
Okay.
is exactly what they're doing.
Interesting. Yeah, Mark, I hope it answered your question. It's difficult to see in Zoom, but if you have an add-on question, don't hesitate to post a new question in the Q&A function. It's interesting, Nick. We are kind of naturally evolving to the next section in the survey, architecture and architectural choices, page 19 for your reference. So you touched serverless. We touched at the start. We talked about containers. There's a whole slew of solutions ranging from maybe Heroku. We talked about that yesterday a little bit, which is kind of a serverless offering, you could say, container hybrid kind of thing. Going to Fargate on Amazon. Of course, I'm a bit biased. We are an Amazon partner and we are a Kubernetes expert, so we are a bit biased. So I'm going to talk from this bias. It's okay. It's a chat. So Amazon Fargate. We also have Kubernetes. How does a SaaS then kind of say, okay, listen, we have some new services, some new workloads. Should we go for serverless? Should we go for containers? Should we go for a hybrid model? Let's just assume that these are the two best paradigms to think about, even for a monolith, apparently. So what is your opinion on this?
Well, first thing I would say.
Sorry, Nick, before you dive in. So just to give you an idea on the survey, question 40, by the way. So about 49% of people have some kind of decoupling. So not just a monolith. 16% still has a single monolith. 49% have some form of decoupling, although still with strong coupling. And then you go to 31%, they really have like more microservices oriented with clean APIs and stuff like that. And only 3% says they have like a function, completely function-based architecture. So just giving that to you.
Yeah, again, my bias is smaller teams. The way I look at microservices and everything is it is in the first place a way to scale up your team in a way that bigger teams either you create a CI/CD system where somebody raises his hand. Yeah, I'm going to deploy. Everybody should now stop working because I will deploy, and then you deploy everything, and then the whole team is waiting, and you start coordinating all these changes. After a while, this just stops working, especially when your team grows. So that then you have to start decoupling things so that teams can more independently work together. So it's, in my opinion, in the first place, an answer to an organizational problem. Turn it around. I saw a team year ago, they were 5 people, and they were nowhere near an MVP, but they were having epic discussions about in which microservice a certain thing should be. Like I said, 5 people. One was in C#, that was his thing. The other ones were in Node.js, that was their thing. So they already had epic discussions about C# being better than Node.js or vice versa. And when push came to shove, for every single request, all the 3-4 services they already had were involved. So then I'm wondering, aren't you making it you're making it very hard for yourself? Yeah. If you just deploy this on top of an Express or on top of a Python or whatever, the C# equivalent of a web app, and you make a monolith out of it, it will work for now, and it will probably work for a couple more months, if not years. Yeah. And it will make your lives all easier. It will guarantee more consistency of the code base. It will. Like I said, my technology is better than yours is a very nice topic to drink a duvel on a terrace in the sun. That is very nice. But if you have that kind of discussions day in, day out within a 4-5 person team, that is just a waste.
Yeah. So just to get back to you, so because you said at the start, so basically you're saying, okay, the level of decomponentization or decoupling or whatever you want to call it from monolith versus microservice and everything in between is really linked to just thinking pragmatically. How big are we as a team? How well can we cope with change and complexity? How do we communicate as a team, etc., etc.
Yeah, that's definitely one aspect of it, and the other one is, I think, since most of the teams we see, and that is also in the survey, are almost entirely dev teams with very little operation skills. Try to embrace that idea. Okay, let's acknowledge that we are not super good at ops, while ops is a part of a SaaS company, whether you like it or not.
It's a core element of a SaaS business.
Voilà, so then look for deployment options that put as much of the ops responsibility to your cloud provider. So if you, for example, can get away with building your app, making it into a container, because that's a very nice, in my opinion, a very nice package structure, by packaging format, and let it run by Fargate. Yeah, why not? That is. You don't have to the cluster on top of which it runs is then abstracted away. I fully
agree, by the way, and we actually have a very interesting case we had with a startup, which was not a classic startup. It was kind of a corporate venture. They had lots of money, and they, for some weird reason, they wanted Kubernetes from the start. I was going, yeah, but you still have a monolith. But they actually knew they were going to be pivoting for half a year with a monolith, because then a monolith with a small team is easy to pivot on. And then they already knew, okay, but at a certain moment we want to already have that containerization deployment model in our fingers. And then we'll start splitting it up into services, and the services will follow the team structure. That's kind of the model they have. And actually they're now in that phase. So it's exactly the same. And actually to go a bit further, I'm getting in some chats and questions. Actually, the audience is stealing my steam, because I was going to make a big statement about a law, but actually Dietrich, Robbe, and Jens, I think you all touched, well, especially Robin and Dietrich. This is actually what Conway's law is about. Conway's law actually says that the complexity of a system will follow the organizational complexity or the communication flows in a team. And typically, you should also think about the other way around. If you don't over-design your system, if you're only like 3 people communicating with each other. And there's a really good book. Thank you, Dietrich, by the way, for reminding it. And actually, I have it right here for the people that want to read. Team Topologies. I'll put it in the follow-up mail. Actually talks about exactly what you said, Nick. It's about operations. It's about complexity of the team. It's about Conway's law. And it's a super interesting read. Yeah. I'm just going over the questions here because some things popped in right now. So yeah, Robbe is actually saying the same. So yes, you're right, Robbe. I'm not sure if the people can see the questions. I think not, to be honest. And then Jens says, if a team would start developing a monolith to quickly deliver business value, what would you need to take it into account for being able to evolve the architecture later on? And how would you decide you should move away from monolithic architecture? Yeah, I think that's the example I gave. I think you start with a small team with a monolith. Maybe already do it in a container or in a serverless function on whatever platform that you want to evolve towards, be it Fargate, be it Kubernetes, be it Lambda even. And at a certain point, you start figuring out, okay, my product is stable. Now we're going to deepen the offering. We're going to grow the team. And that's probably a good moment when you start deepening the architecture as well.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
okay.
It is an organizational. In the first place, I think it's an organizational matter. If you start running into Conway's law and into when things become too complex to manage, then probably something needs to change, and that's the moment where maybe you start splitting off stuff from your monolith into separate services. Yeah, and I think the fact that you build a monolith is not an excuse to do bad software engineering. Yeah? You still need to think about having your software maintainable and nicely composed, and use patterns like inversion of control and that kind of things. Yeah, I mean, whether you develop a monolith or microservices, that doesn't matter so much. You want to do that. You want to have these practices in house, and it might help you. The thing is, I always make the joke: your software stops evolving the moment your last user leaves the door. You will always be bitten by things you didn't foresee, because yeah, half a year down the line, people are using your software differently. Your team looks at the thing differently. So evolution is obvious. You will have to evolve. Yeah. Always for a reason, not just because.
Yeah, and we're all engineers, so we have a tendency to overanalyze and overcomplicate and overstructure things, maybe, and maybe not take into account reality, and not just the reality of the customers, but also the customer reality of our own teams and the constraints we may have. All right, I think that's a nice way to wrap up this conversation. And I'm looking at the time. Yeah. I have the feeling we could talk for another hour, because we actually didn't touch some areas like security and some other things, but that's more for Erwin to talk about, I guess, as well. We don't want to take away his steam too much either. So there's no other questions that I'm missing here. That some anonymous attendee asked if he's where he could find an internship around DevOps. I think there's a lot of companies that are looking for interns around DevOps and stuff. I'm not sure if this is the right place where we can help you right now. Feel free to email me, by the way, anonymous attendee. That being said, thank you, Nick, for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Your useful insights. Maybe where can people reach you if they have like any questions or what? Like,
if you just Google me, you'll find me on either the Cirrus website, you'll find me on LinkedIn, you'll find me on Twitter. Probably LinkedIn will be the easiest if you want. That's
all right.
Voilà.
Yeah, we'll just put some links to your persona in the wrap-up mail that we'll be sending end of this week or beginning of next week. Just for the attendees. So first of all, some things. Tomorrow we have Erwin Gernaert, who will be looking more at the security aspects of the survey. He has a very broad knowledge on security, both technical and organizational, so it's going to be definitely very interesting. And yeah, that's basically it. Please do let us know on Twitter or LinkedIn what you liked about this Tech Talk, or what you didn't like or missed in this Tech Talk. We are always happy to learn. It's the second time we do this. And if there's nothing else that remains, then to say thank you for your time and see you soon. Thank you, Nick, again as well.
Okay. Bye, everybody.